Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you about this topic, and I'm so excited to see so many people who care about it and want to learn more. You don't want me to sing? Okay, there we go. Yay. Okay, so 2020 has been a little rough on our elections, but I would argue that it started a long time ago. Our election code has never been all that great, and our executive branch has failed us for 25 years. We've had 25 years of Republican governors, and not a single one of them has put forward a Secretary of State who puts election integrity as a top priority. In fact, I've been told by many people that they're pretty much just an ambassador to Mexico. So I will say Governor Abbott did try to put someone forward, but if I can get this to flip or not. Whoa, way too far. Go back. Okay. But the legislative branch failed on that. So Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick failed to secure the votes in order to confirm that Secretary of State that we would have had. And of course, we all know Speaker Dennis Bonnen failed to push any sort of conservative agenda on election integrity. Okay, so the legislative branch failed us even more when it came to passing bills. We had all kinds of bills that would have fixed loopholes, that would have fixed problems like in Gregg County, where they have an entire commissioner's precinct that is disabled when it comes time to vote. In fact, their representative actually put forward, Jay Dean put forward 3 bills that would have cleaned up disability and would have helped them. They didn't even get a hearing. And if you'll note on that screen, hopefully you can read that, where basically it tells you that the chairwoman of this committee was a Republican, Stephanie Click, and you had members of the Freedom Caucus on that committee. And no meaningful election integrity legislation was passed. Now, the previous session, we had to force it into a special session, but actually it was, I will say, Senator Kelly Hancock and Representative Craig Goldman who pushed that legislation, which made a huge difference, but there are still loopholes that are big enough to drive a truck through. And let me tell you something, the Democrats are ready to drive that truck, lots of them, through those loopholes. For instance, our judicial branch is completely overwhelmed. We have Harris County trying to send applications for mail-in ballot to all registered voters who are not eligible to vote by mail. We have, a lawsuit that basically was claiming that having people over 65 allowed to vote by mail and not everyone was some sort of age discrimination. We had, trying to eliminate signature verification, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later. But the signature verification is basically the only way to have any kind of voter ID with mail-in ballots. And then also, as I spoke about a moment ago, about redefining disability and basically saying that fear of COVID was a disability. Well, guess what? It's not. So what do we do when our government fails us? So we as conservatives are pretty much used to our government failing us, right? So every time, what do? We step up and do it ourselves. And that's what we're going to have to do in this election cycle. That's what we're going to have to do for November, is we're going to have to step up and do what we can to fill these loopholes and stand in the gap. So why is it so difficult to clean up our elections? I have people ask me that all the time. And I would say the first thing that makes it so difficult is, who can tell me how many counties there are in the state of Texas? 254 counties. You know, that means that that's 254 separately run elections run by 254 different people in 254 different ways. There is not necessarily a set person who's in charge of elections. There's not a set rule in a lot of cases. Each county determines their own. So for instance, some counties have an elected person who's in charge of their elections. It could be the county clerk, the district clerk, the tax assessor collector, or a combination of those. Or you could have an elections administrator, and that person is appointed by the election commission, which is made up of your county judge, your county clerk, your tax assessor collector, and then the Republican and Democrat county chairs. So this is when you really need to think about your county elections. A lot of people, I'm sure no one in this room, but a lot of people don't pay any attention to who they're electing for their county officials. It is very, very important, especially when it comes to elections, that we make sure that the right people are in place. So good news. If you're not on this list, which is, let's see, Zavala, Presidio, Travis, El Paso, Starr, Maverick, Webb, Jim Hogg, Brooks, Dimmitt, Hidalgo, Duval, Dallas, Zapata, Culberson, Cameron, Willacy, Bear, Harris, Hayes, and Lampasas. Then the Republicans are in charge. Now, Fort Bend and Brewster, they barely squeaked it out because it's based on the number of votes for the gubernatorial candidate. So Governor Abbott did not get over 50% of the votes, but he got the majority. So those counties I mentioned have Democrats in charge. That means the presiding judge of the polling locations, as well as the presiding judge of the ballot board, are going to be Democrats in those counties, but everywhere else it's Republicans. So that means that the person who makes the final decision is a Republican. So if election fraud happens in those counties, including this one, then it's because Republicans failed. So, accurate voter rolls. Secretary of State is in charge for most of the list maintenance activities. So they're going to have moving between counties. So if you move from one place to another, convicted felons, non-citizens, which there has never truly been a list maintenance activity that has eliminated non-citizens from our rolls. In fact, when they tried to do it, there was a lawsuit and there was a compromise made that basically the only people who are removed as non-citizens are people who self-identify. Meaning that if they walk into the DPS office and say, I'm not a citizen and I want to renew my driver's license, they're removed from the voter rolls. But otherwise, you can just check that little box on your registration and say you're a citizen, and nobody makes sure that that's true. The other thing, too, is interstate cross-check. So our current Secretary of State has said that we're going to participate in interstate cross-check, but as far as I know, nothing has happened to actually do that. So there could be people who are registered to vote in 5 different states and voting in 5 different states, and we wouldn't know. County clerk. So the county clerk is in charge of removing deceased voters. So, all those Democrats that vote from the graveyard, as the joke goes. Then you have district clerks and county courts. Now, they're supposed to let the elections office know when they have non-citizens identified in the jury pool. So these are people who come forward when they're called for jury duty and say, oh, hey, I can't serve because I'm not a citizen. So they are supposed to be told to the elections administrator, but I would argue that if you have your courts are functioning properly, they should also be letting the attorney general know to prosecute someone who's illegally on the voter rolls. You also have voters declared mentally incapacitated, and that's one of the things you want to make sure this is happening. So a lot of these list maintenance activities, they may or may not be happening. These 254 different people who are in charge of these elections, I've heard stories. They're not doing it because no one makes them do it. The Secretary of State's supposed to make sure that they do it, but there's no penalties if they don't. So you need to be the people in your county who are calling these individuals and letting them know that you want to make sure that these activities are being done. So, for activists, precinct chairs, campaigns, when you're going out and you're voting, you need to get those lists. Knock on doors. Know who your voters are. So whether you're doing this as a precinct chair and you're walking your precinct, or it's just your neighborhood, or just some area that you want to claim ownership over, you can challenge inaccuracies. So that means that if you walk up to a door, I've done it many times, and there's 7 people listed that live there, but only 3 of them actually do. And the homeowner tells you, oh yeah, those other people haven't lived here for 10 years. You can actually fill out a form and basically say that these people don't live here anymore. And then you can send that in, and there's a process to eventually remove them from the voter rolls. So that's something that you can do while you're out block walking, making phone calls, whatever it is that you're doing. And if you want to know how to do that, you can either ask me, or a lot of times your GOP county chair will know how to do that, and they'll be able to help you with it. The other thing I want to ask you to do is you need to educate your fellow voters. I cannot tell you how many times my heart has been broken when people have called me and said, such and such happened at the polls, but I went ahead and cast my vote. And I've said, oh, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do to help you. You have to deal with that situation right then and there. If you made a mistake on your ballot, or you see that it's marked wrong or something like that, you have to deal with it right then and there. The election judge can spoil your ballot and give you a new one. You need to make sure that you've been given the correct ballot, that you have the right precincts, because I've heard so many stories of, you've got an election location where there's combined precincts and they mess up and they give you the wrong list. And then people come back later and say, hey, why wasn't my candidate on there? And I say, because they gave you the wrong ballot. But you have to fix that right there at the polls. So what you want to do is the first person you want to talk to is the presiding judge. If you're not getting anywhere with that presiding judge, then you want to go to the elections administrator, whoever that is in your county. After that, you want to go to the Republican Party headquarters. They have told me that they're going to have lawyers on standby that you can call, and we'll have that number for you, and they'll have that number for you. And the last thing is the Direct Action Texas hotline, which we have on our website, and I'll have at the end of this presentation. Have these numbers saved in your phone ahead of time, because while you'll have to step outside to make the phone call, you want to have it already ready in there so that you can go ahead and you're not searching for numbers or trying to find, you just want to have these numbers saved and ready to go. Election judges and clerks, and especially poll watchers, you need to go in and be prepared. The Secretary of State actually has some great handbooks for election judges and also poll watchers. So what I recommend, if you're a poll watcher, which is someone that's a volunteer position, you basically go in, you can serve any amount of time, from 30 minutes covering somebody's lunch or break, or 30 hours during early voting. So you choose how much time that you want to help out. And this is something that, is actually really easy to do. I just recommend that you bring the handbook with you. I've had many election judges challenge me and say, no, you can't do that. And I flip it open because you won't have access to your phone or the internet. I flip it open and I say, here, right here, this thing printed out by the Secretary of State, this says that I can. And so if you don't want me to do that, then you're going to have to take it up with someone higher than you, because it says it right here. So that's really handy. You want to bring a notepad, you want to bring a pen, you want to be able to take notes. You want to be able to write down if you see things that are happening that shouldn't be happening. But you also want to call and let people know. So my husband was an election judge during a primary, and he saw that the Democrat at the next table wasn't checking IDs. So you got to make sure that if you see something like that, that you call the elections administrator, and he did, and the elections administrator fixed it right away. But I will tell you that if nobody is watching, bad things happen. Because think about it. If you have a polling location that does not have a Republican judge, and I would say, and the reverse is true, but if you have, it's all Democrats sitting there, and you don't have any Republicans in the room, you know how easy it is to just run names through and vote for people who aren't there? It's pretty darn easy. And if you know how to do it, it's really easy. You just have to forge a couple signatures. So understand, this election is for all the marbles. So this is really important, and everybody needs to be on guard, because if they can't win it, they'll try and steal it. And tonight, when I do elections and I do election investigations, I put on blinders, and I pay no attention to who the candidates are, because I don't care. I just want a fair election. But tonight, I'm just going to tell you, it's for this election, it's the Democrats who are going to try and steal it. I'm just being honest. So, chain of custody. You need to have poll watchers at central count. That's where they take all the stuff, where all the election judges take all the stuff, and they drop it off. You need to make sure that those ballots or those flash drives or whatever it is in your county, that they're not disappearing into another room and coming out the other side a different flash drive. You need to make sure that boxes don't go missing like what happened in the Midland ISD election, where boxes just get stuck on a shelf and disappear. So you need to make sure that none of that kind of stuff is going on. So I'm going to remind you at this point, if you have any questions, to let you raise your hand, let them know that you need a note card, jot it down, and I'll answer those at the end. But now I'm going to get into voting by mail. So this is how, our organization actually got into this. So Direct Action Texas, we actually did campaigns. We ran a lot of campaigns. We had full-time block walkers. We had people who would go out and just, gather information on voters, and we would help with campaigns. So we were helping with a campaign for the Tarrant Regional Water District, and the numbers came out very different from what we were expecting. Sometimes that happens, so sometimes polling can be incorrect. But my former boss, Aaron Harris, started getting phone calls from a bunch of reporters. And they all said, "Have you figured it out yet? Have you figured out why you lost?" And as he had these conversations, his voice started getting louder and louder. "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" And they would say the Fort Worth Way. "What is that?" Finally, he gets this one reporter on the line. I hear him slam his hand down on the table, jumps out of his chair. I hear the chair fly backwards and hit the wall. And he says, "You're going to tell me what this is." And she said, "Mail-in ballot fraud." We'd never heard of mail-in ballot fraud. Most conservatives have never heard of mail-in ballot fraud. But I tell you what, the other side's been doing it for a really long time. We just didn't know. So we started looking into it. We started investigating. And we ended up exposing a whole bunch of different problems, but we found what Governor Abbott called the largest voter fraud harvesting operation in Texas history. I don't know if that's actually true or not, because there's probably been bigger ones. But it was a huge deal. And so we really just switched our whole focus onto voter fraud, because we didn't feel like anybody was really jumping into that area and treating it effectively. So what is the big deal with voting by mail? This is an application. This is an official application to vote by mail. It has a lot of different sections to it. At the top, it has all the different things that you can check. It has your name and address, and you can put in what your reason is for voting by mail. And at the bottom, it has a section for assistants and witnesses. And assistants are people who just help you. If you help someone with their ballot by mail, even by putting a stamp on it and taking it to their mailbox, you have now become an assistant. And you have to put your information on there as an assistant. So I would suggest that if you're going out and people are wanting applications for ballot by mail, hand them a blank form and walk away. to keep yourself safe. If you do anything other than that, fill out the assistant form. Now, if someone is unable to sign, usually that's due to blindness or disability or illiteracy, you can sign for them, and that would be considered a witness. So 2 different things. And on an application, you can only witness for 1 person per cycle. But all of these are, if you are a direct family member, like if you're someone's parent, grandparent, grandchild, child, someone who lives in the same household, you don't have to fill out the assistant witness, because I suggest you do, but you don't have to if you're somebody who's like a close relative and you're helping them out. One of the issues we started to see is that campaigns will send out their own applications for ballot by mail. This happens a lot. It used to be mostly Democrats who did this, but now Republicans are jumping in the game as well. The problem with these is a lot of times they don't have the portion for assistants and witnesses. So if you assist someone with your application, you can unwittingly be breaking the law by not putting your information on there. So again, I suggest that you give people the official form. If you're wanting to go block walking and help people out, or go to a nursing home and hand them out, I would give them the official form that you can obtain from the elections office. So this is what's sent to the voter. This is Tarrant County. Other counties are going to look a little bit different colors, different things. But essentially, it's the main envelope. You're going to have a ballot envelope, the ballot, a carrier envelope, and then you're going to have instructions. So what the voter is supposed to do is they're supposed to put their ballot inside the ballot envelope, and then inside the carrier envelope, and then sign the outside of the carrier envelope. So that signature on the carrier envelope is what is supposed to match the signature on the application. But the way the law is written now, which we help to fix, is that we are determining whether or not it is the signature of the voter and not necessarily that the signatures match. So what that means, and this is a good thing, so what that means is that if somebody looks and they don't match, and the application is the bad signature, so a ballot board member has the ability to look back at 6 years worth of signatures and also their registration card. So if you look back and you see that all the signatures previously match the carrier envelope, then you can say, okay, this was the voter. Somebody else might have filled out their application, but the voter signed the carrier envelope, and you can count that. But if the carrier envelope is different from all those previous signatures, you can say, yeah, that's not the voter, and throw that out. So Southeast Fort Worth, every single one of those are precincts, that's what those are, circled in the little red circles. Every single one of those had this handwriting. I hope you can see that. So those are all applications for ballot by mail. And they might have all gone to the same elementary school, but I doubt it. But they all have the same curious handwriting. So that's what we saw out there. I don't think those voters are filling out their own applications. Then in north side of Fort Worth, we saw something else. So these are signatures of 2 sisters, Anna Garcia and Mary Lou Medrano. And if you look on here, the red signatures, the ones with the red background, those are from their applications. The ones with the blue background are the ones from their carrier envelopes. So not only do they not match each other, they also, if you carefully look at the top ones, the red ones, they look like they were signed by the same person. So I actually spoke to these ladies, and so I know for a fact that those red signatures are not theirs. They told me so. The ones in the blue are theirs. So somebody basically applied for an application for ballot by mail for them. And what they did, so this was back in the day when you could fax in an application. And that was another thing that we ended with that great bill, SB 5, with Kelly Hancock, is that it made it so you couldn't fax them in anymore, because what they were doing is they would take an application and they would copy it and they would just fax it in every year. Yeah. So now, if somebody says in the code that it now requires a wet signature, meaning that you have to actually sign on the paper, it can't be a copy, that's why. So this one might be a little bit more difficult to see, but this woman, her name is Concepcion with a C, and it's spelled 3 different ways on the applications that were sent in for her. Concepcion with a T, Caption, and Connie. Clearly, this woman did not send in her own applications. And the one in blue we do believe to be her actual signature. So what they do, and I say that these carrier envelopes are their actual signature, I'm going to tell you a story about a gentleman and his wife who basically had a woman come to their door and say, hey, do you want to vote by mail? And they said, no, we don't want to vote by mail. We vote literally across the street, and we vote right there, and we vote in person, and we're good. She kept asking them over and over and over again, please just, will you vote by mail? And then finally she said, well, if you won't, could you please at least sign my paper so my boss knows that I was here and so that I can get paid for the day? And so they said, okay, we'll sign your paper. We don't want you to have to, not go home if you're ready to go home. So they signed this paper, not realizing that what they were signing was actually the back of their carrier envelope, because they had it hidden so that all they saw was the little part to sign, and so they actually signed it. So that's how they're getting these actual signatures on the carrier envelopes. Or in other ways, they're going to people's houses and they're just saying, let me help you. There's all those different papers and envelopes and whatever. Let me just help you. And I had one woman tell me that she told the lady that she wanted to vote all Democrat. This was a city election. They're not Republican or Democrat, supposedly, in city elections. So how did she know who the lady wanted to vote for? She put on there who she was paid to put on there. In other places, so in Dallas County, they go around with fruit baskets and give you fruit baskets and then fill out your ballot or just take it from you. In the Valley, they hand out cocaine and alcohol. So they have all sorts of creative ways to get people's ballots. In some cases, it'll be the postal workers who, raise their hand when they put one in the mailbox, and somebody comes behind them and grabs them all out and takes them. So if you don't know that you're sending in an application, you don't expect a ballot, so somebody can just go take it if they know when it's coming. This is why we have an issue with ballot by mail. These 4 ladies are the ones who have been indicted in Tarrant County for doing ballot harvesting, for organized fraud activity, which that great bill that we had way back when established that, where basically they treat it like organized crime, like a RICO statute, so that way they can get the small fish to turn on the bigger fish, which is really who you want to get. So there's thousands of harvesters working in Texas each election. We've seen them in Tarrant, Dallas, Kaufman, Harrison, Nueces, Gregg, and Webb. And I know they're in a lot more places than that. So this is a serious issue that's going on. We have one person that we believe harvested 700 votes just by his lonesome. So if one person can get 700 votes, just imagine how many, 10 people, 20 people. They can totally flip our election. So who watches this and who takes care of this? It's the ballot board. They're the last line of defense. They're the ones who need to have proper training, which most of them don't. Most of them don't even know, the ones I've spoken to, don't even know that there is a training online from the Secretary of State that they can look at. So the other thing you want to do is you want to make sure you have poll watchers in that room. Make sure you're watching and make sure they're actually checking signatures. Make sure they're actually doing their job, because they're also in charge of all of the provisional ballots, the overseas ballots. And the overseas ballots, they have to literally remake, which means they're literally filling out a new ballot when those come in. So you want to make sure you have people you trust serving in those positions. So, what can you do? You can learn the process, which I've told you a lot about that tonight. You can know the laws, and you can communicate them to voters. Let people know that the truly safe and secure way to vote is in person, where you are protected by a judge who makes sure that no one is standing over your shoulders and telling you who to vote for. No one is taking the ballot out of your hand, out of your mailbox, losing it in the mail. Nobody's doing any of that. You are making sure that your vote is being counted in the way that you want it to be counted. And let me clarify. I talked about disability earlier. This is the actual election code on disability. A qualified voter is eligible for early voting by mail if the voter has a sickness or physical condition that prevents the voter from appearing at the polling place on election day without a likelihood of needing personal assistance or of injuring the voter's health. So that can be misinterpreted, that can be misconstrued, which is why we tried to fix it. But the key word here is has a sickness. Not is afraid of a sickness, has a sickness. So, you want to grab these numbers, write these down. They're also on our website if you don't have the ability to write them down now or take a picture or whatever. That is also my email address, so you can email me, but there's also a tips@directactiontx.com, which is our election fraud prevention hotline email address. I'll give you all a second to take a picture of that before I move on. Okay. So the other thing that we have online to help you is we have quick guides. We have quick guides for voters, and that's both by mail and in person, which is what I talked about, the things to look for, the things to watch out for, what you can and can't do. We're also going to have them for activists. We have one for activists and campaigns. We have election judges and clerks coming this week, and we have poll watchers coming this week as well. And then we have ballot board and signature verification committee. Those are on our website now. So you want to go to our website, directactiontx.com, and you want to take a look at those. What I did is I put them on there in a format that is easy to copy, print. Please feel free, print, hand out, email, share those with everyone you know so that they know what to do when they get to the polls or what to do with voting by mail, what to do when they go to serve these roles. Because I want to equip you with everything that you need to know and everything that everyone needs to know to make sure that we have the best integrity that we can in this election before hopefully we have a session and change some laws. But please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, you need help. That's just something that, I would love to help you with if you have any questions, especially before the election when I'm not completely slammed. But now is a great time to ask questions, and we're going to do some questions now.
Got some? All right. While I'm collecting these, I know one thing that I've been asked. I had a call from a friend of mine, and her parents are in an assisted living, and her dad had called her and was just so confused because he said, we're getting... Well, it was really cute. He said, we're getting mail-in ballots, and Trump told us we weren't going to mail in our ballots. So there's just so much confusion over it because we keep hearing we're not going to have mail-in ballots, but there are legit people. What about like the senior care and things like that? Are you finding there's a lot of confusion in that? Or?
Yes, so absolutely. If someone is not able to go to the polls, I absolutely do not want them to miss out on their vote. But if you are voting by mail, the ways that you can vote by mail is if you are going to be out of the county, and then your ballot has to be sent out of the county, and you have to be out of the county for the entire early voting period as well as election day. If you are incarcerated but not convicted of a felony, if you are over 65, that is also a qualification for voting by mail, or if you're disabled. So seriously, if you're not able to go to the polls, please vote by mail. That's what it's for. But if you are able, if you can go to the grocery store, you can vote in person.
Ooh, preach.
And you are not required to wear a mask. You're welcome.
Okay, my mother will be there then. Okay, so I've got some good questions for you. This is a practical one, and I know I've been asked this before. How do you become a poll watcher? I'm new to Texas.
Okay, becoming a poll watcher is really easy. So all you have to do is there's forms that are online, and usually you can get them from your GOP office. But basically it's on the Secretary of State's website. You can be appointed by a candidate. So any candidate in that election can appoint you. And they can appoint up to 2 per location. That's a lot of poll watchers if every single person had poll watchers. But you can do that. You can also be appointed by your county chair or members of your executive committee. And you can be appointed, like say there's a ballot measure and there's a PAC that's behind that ballot measure, they can also appoint you as a poll watcher. So really it's just a form that you sign and that person signs and you're good to go. But I would say check out the training, check out our quick guide, and then also there is a handbook on the Secretary of State's website for that.
Excellent. That's a really good question because people move in and don't know. So has Judicial Watch influenced the voting in Texas? I don't know if that's in your sphere of...
So as far as I know, they have not, but there could be something that I'm just not aware of that they've done in the past. But as far as I know, recently there hasn't really been anything.
Okay, so this is a 2-parter. Who controls and verifies the voter registration software? Who's verifying it?
So the software is approved by the Secretary of State's office. So they're the ones that have to go in and approve every kind of software that comes in and is used in Texas elections. So they go through and do that. One of the things that we tried to get past last legislative session was risk limiting audits, which would really help with making sure that those systems are functioning properly, because most of those systems are not new systems. I've been told that some of them function off of Pascal. So they are from way back in the day. So that is one thing that does need to be addressed is auditing of those software systems.
Put that on the things to do list. Why did the U.S. Post Office send me a postcard telling me how safe mail-in voting is?
Oh.
They were doing their own little commercial there.
Well, that's a good question. I hadn't heard of that yet. So the post office actually sent you something saying it was safe? Oh my.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how many have received that? I think I did, and I think I threw it out. Wow. Okay.
Wow. Okay, first of all, if you still have it, please take a picture of it and send it to me.
I know I think
Yeah,
I
if
got
any
it
of
too,
you
and I
still
threw
have
it
it.
out.
But the thing is I think they're trying to do a PR campaign because they're being attacked. And they're basically trying to say, oh no, it's safe, but they should not be doing that.
They're taking it very personally.
Yeah, they are. They definitely are.
Wow.
So yeah, so I'd love to know if there's any small print on there that it's actually funded by some PAC or something like that. Mm-hmm. So
the Postal Union, yeah, correct.
Postal Union.
All right, how do you confirm that you are registered to vote and that your name will be on the precinct list when you show up at the polls? And I know I get anxiety about that. There's this thing like I'm going to show up and my name's not going to be on it, and I'm going to be like, no, really, I was invited to the party, like really. But so is there a way to call and verify that? You know, we got voter registration cards before, and that kind of gave me a good feeling, but not so much.
Yeah, so what you want to do is, depending upon which county that you live in, again, some counties have on the website where you can just look and make sure you're registered. You should also be able to, the Secretary of State's website should also be able to find that for you on their main page. There's a thing that am I registered to vote, where it has like the little question, and then you can click on that and you can check to make sure you're registered to vote. But if you're really not sure, you can always call your county and ask them, am I on the rolls? They should be able to tell you that.
Yeah, if you voted in the primaries, you should be.
Right.
But if you're new to the state or something and you just want to check, you can. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Less than 6 months, call the clowning clerk. And you know, one of the things you keep hearing is Secretary of State, Secretary of State, Secretary of State. It's kind of important to get the right person in that position because you can hear how many things it affects. What are the criminal penalties, misdemeanor or felony, for various forms of election fraud, and how do we get the ball rolling if we find it?
Okay.
So how serious? I mean, is this one of those things? You know, it's kind of gotten like marijuana or whatever. It's no big deal. You know, so
that awesome piece of legislation I keep referring to from 2017 actually did raise the penalties on a lot of these from misdemeanors to felonies. So a lot of these are now felonies. There are still some things that are misdemeanors that I would love to see moved up to felonies. But for the most part, anything that has to do with ballot harvesting or impersonating someone else at the polls, like those kind of things are felonies.
Yeah, that's excellent. I tell you what, we're having the biggest problem with is sign stealing. So if the other side is going to, they just don't have a problem with stealing. So this is not out of their realm of what.
Right.
I delivered my neighbor 5 signs. He's down to the last one.
And that is a crime. And one of the things that I heard is that the best thing to do is make sure that you place your sign far enough from the curb that they have to step onto your property to take your sign, because then you can get them for criminal trespass as well as stealing your sign if you catch them. So that's a thing, maybe put cameras up. I know that's terrible.
I was going to say, I think rings are.
I know.
If I had stock in rings, it'd be awesome.
Right.
Did you have something to add, Craig?
What I did with my Trump sign in the primary, I coated it with Vaseline and pepper spray.
Nice.
You would. Like, that's such a Craig thing.
Nice.
There you go.
Nice.
And I have other people saying put them in a window, or something like that. But oh my gosh, it just makes
it's a very sad thing that we have to deal with signs being stolen.
Like, is it really going to offend you that much? Anyway, let me make sure I have this. Review for the U.S. Please review for us the effects of the Vote America Act passed by U.S. Congress after Bush versus Gore. Did it help or hurt? Do you know? So that's the Vote America Act that was passed by Congress after the Bush and Gore debacle.
So for the most part, anything coming out of the U.S. Congress having to do with elections is not good.
There you go.
So I'm going to answer your question with that. But a lot of times what they do is they just open those loopholes. They basically make it's written in such a way that people can just get around whatever's in there. It's written to make it seem like, things are discrimination when they're not, because I will tell you, one of the things I get called racist all the time, and I'm just going to say that most of the people whose doorways I have stood in where they cried because their vote was taken, they were minorities. Those are the people who are being victimized because English is their second language. People who have disabilities, those are the people who are the victims, and those are the people that we're trying to help, because I want their votes to count the way they want them and not the way somebody else wants it. So I will tell you right now, there is nothing racist about wanting free and fair elections. That's why people come here. That's why people immigrate here, because they want to live in a country that has laws, that has freedoms and liberties, and protects your vote from someone else trying to steal it from you.
Such a good point. I was going to say that. That's what they fought and crossed rivers and whatever to get here for, and then it gets stolen. Okay, what happened to the fraud cases in the 2016 and 2018 in Dallas and Corsicana?
So, what happens with most of the fraud cases, unfortunately, the justice system moves incredibly slowly, and especially with COVID. So like those ladies I showed you that have been indicted, that case was given to, it was given to them in 2015, 2016, and those ladies were not indicted until I think last year, and their case is still pending. So that tells you how long the justice system takes to work. But I will tell you that even before any arrests were made, before there were any indictments or anything like that, we had a lot of people who were going to run for re-election and did not because they knew that people were watching, and someone else who lost because she couldn't harvest. So sometimes just going in and exposing these things is enough to make them stop. So even if we don't necessarily get victories in the courts, and that's where the other side tries to say that there aren't any voter fraud convictions, is because most of them don't result in convictions. Most of them are plea deals. And also, you know, it takes a really long time to get these. And a lot of times you find them after the statute of limitations has run out. So that's part of the problem. So don't feel like nothing's ever going to happen, because it will. It just takes a long time, unfortunately. And let me say with that, in the Election Integrity Division of the Attorney General's office, there is one prosecutor, and I believe now they have 3 investigators. Wow. So that's for the entire state. So understand that it's not as much of a priority as it should be, and they don't have the resources to respond to everything as they should. So I do believe that elections is a core function of government, and that we probably should stop spending so much money on things that are not core functions of government and put it towards shoring up our election.